Hi everyone, Will from Runchat here. In this tutorial we're going to learn how to fine-tune a STXL or Flux LoRA model in order to teach this diffusion model a new set of styles that we'll then be able to use in other workflows. Training LoRA models is particularly useful for or in conjunction with control nets where you set a form of an image and then we use our LoRA to define the style of an image. It's similar to using the STXL IP adapter model, except that the IP adapter model it only works when the model's already aware of the style of your reference image. It doesn't work with unusual styles, whereas when we fine-tune a LoRA, we can really teach the model something new. So we're going to start from scratch, and the first thing that we'll need to do is to just save our Runchat. So just give it a name. And then we can upload our images that we want to use to fine-tune our model. So I've got a bunch of photographs of sculptures by a Melbourne artist or Australian artist called Freya Jobbins. She makes sculptures which are made up of toys, and the reason that I think this might be interesting to use for a fine-tune is we're going to be able to teach the model how to make up one object, in this case sort of a face or something, out of many smaller objects, and it's that relationship between the overall form of the thing and its parts which I think fine-tuning might be useful for. We aren't just trying to completely replicate these designs, that's not interesting and you shouldn't do that. Instead we're trying to teach these diffusion models about some kind of new stylistic concept that maybe they aren't overly aware of. So we've uploaded our models. We can make sure that they've been uploaded and show up in the asset browser. So we're just going to refresh this page and go to browse assets, and they should all be there. If they don't show up, it might have been because you've uploaded your images before you've saved it, and there would be no ID of our Runchat to associate these images with. So just make sure that you've saved your Runchat, you've got an ID, then you upload your images and they'll show up here. So to train a LoRA model, we go to the gallery, and the images that we just generated, hopefully, or just uploaded, will show up here. You can train a model on images that you have generated or uploaded. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to just be real images that you've uploaded. This could be images that you've made through some other specific workflow. I might actually leave this one out because the really important thing when you're training a LoRA is you want the images to be as consistent as possible so that the fine-tuning process can, and we don't want duplicates as well, so I'm going to unselect that one, so that the fine-tuning process can learn the kind of similarities in the concept between all of these images and not get kind of confused by there being multiple concepts. You want to avoid having duplicate images, and you want between 10 and 20 images for this to work well. So we just select all of the images that we want to train our LoRA on from the gallery, and then we click Train LoRA. We leave it as a style LoRA. We can choose which model we want to train with. So there's a couple of options here. We can fine-tune a Flux LoRA. Flux Dev, Flux Crea is for styles, Flux Context is for editing transformations, or an STXL LoRA. And you can see that the credit cost for all of these is different, and that's because of the amount of GPU time that is required for each one of these different training runs. I'm going to start by just training a STXL Lite LoRA because it only costs 750 credits. And we need to choose a trigger word. So the trigger word is going to be used to, when we put this in our prompt, it will start referencing the style which we've trained in our LoRA. This trigger word needs to be an uncommon word. So don't use a word which the model might already be aware of. We can leave it as Runchat by default, or maybe RunchatToys. And we're going to call this, just give it a name that is memorable, because we're going to need to refer back to this later. Then we click Start Training. So Runchat will upload a zip file. Your zip file can be 50 megabytes max. So if you're training on lots of images, make sure that that's not over 50 megabytes, and or if you're training on very large images, that can also throw you over 50 meg. So if you get an error here, just check the size of your images. Okay, so that started a SDXL Lite run. For the sake of comparison, I'm also going to do a run using Flux. So we'll select all of these, go train LoRA. We'll train one on Flux. Call this Flux. Much more expensive, but also much higher quality output. So we're going to click Start Training. And that's started our training run, and we can check back on it later. So we can click on View Training Runs to see both all of the LoRAs that we've previously trained, as well as the progress on the ones that we're currently training. So we've got two here, our Flux and our SDXL LoRA. You can see the trigger word that they use, the model URL once the LoRA has actually finished training, and at least if you're training Flux LoRAs, we can also see the progress in the logs. Alright, we're going to wait. The SDXL training process, the really cheap one, that takes about 20 minutes. The Flux one takes about 3 minutes. So we'll check back here when it's done. Okay, so our Flux LoRA has finished training after a couple of minutes, and now we can go ahead and try it out. So I'm just going to click New Workflow, and we'll start from scratch. And for our Flux LoRA, what we want is the model that is called Flux LoRA. Now to use our new LoRA model is really simple. We're just going to click Select LoRA, and we scroll down and we find the one that we just trained. Click on that. And we also need to note the trigger word. It's easy to forget the trigger word, so this one's RunchatToys. So let's put that in our prompt. And we'll hit go and find out what it does. Okay, that is definitely working. Now we can use this to design and play around with things just by changing the prompt. So as long as we have our trigger word in here, we can keep describing the type of image that we want, just like normal, and it will be conditioned with our LoRA, in this case making things out of toys. Now the really powerful application for this is to turn things in to being made out of toys. That's what's kind of fun about it, let's say. So let's make an image of a Gary building. This is my kind of go-to quick test image. I'm going to make some piece of architecture, and I'm going to try and generate that same building but out of toys. So we've got a bunch here. Let's make this one out of toys. Seems fun. And to do this, what we're going to use is we're going to use Flux with control nets and LoRAs. There's a couple of different models we can use: control LoRA canny, control LoRA depth. We can play around with all of these. Let's try the LoRA depth model first. We'll plug that in and have a look at the settings. So we've got pre-processed depth set to true. That's important because we don't have a depth image here. We've got a photograph, so we need to pre-process it and turn it into a depth image, which will then control our output. We've got a strength for how much we want the depth to control our output, and maybe in this case it might be worth actually turning that down a little bit, but we'll come back to it. I'm going to turn off the safety checker because some of those toys images are a little bit sketchy, and we're going to pick our LoRA to use, and RunchatToys will be our prompt. Let's just hit play and we'll just see what we get. Now hopefully the result of this will be this kind of form, which we're generating with one image, but the style of our toys, which is pretty much exactly what we get. Kind of fairly satisfying. So it's keeping a lot of the depth of this object here. It's definitely keeping the silhouette, but it's now been assembled out of a whole lot of weird little hands and feet and things like that. So that is the beauty of using the LoRA fine-tunes for these sorts of design tasks where you're trying to combine ideas for particular forms with ideas for particular styles or even compositions or Mariology or things like that. Alright, have fun.